So, classification. Classifiers follow the IPC. IPC is International Paralympic Committee classification code with specificity toward archery. They do functional assessments, which means they only look at what will affect the shooting process. They don't look at the entire picture for the impairment of the archer. And they basically look for certain impairments that are allowed to be classified for. And I don't want to tell you that because you're not a physio, and you might ask me, what's that? And I can't answer you. Okay? But it's basically a system that allocates a final sport class and designates a classification status where points are allocated depending on the impairments. I'm seeing Pesilius because she is a judge and at the same time a classifier. And a physio, because you cannot be a classifier if you are not a physiotherapist. And before I move forward, I just want to acknowledge Megan Tierney. You see her name there on the slide. These are her slides. And she is also a classifier and a judge and a physio. And she's the expert here. I just simply updated her slides because these were for last year. And some rules have changed. Okay? So I just want to give her that credit. Now, what do the classifiers do? So I have here a do and do not. They put an athlete in their division. They allow adaptive equipment to match the level of their disability from the approved list in the rulebook appendix. There is an approved list of adaptive equipment, which we will go into later. And they advise judges during equipment inspection. However, they do not give adaptive equipment to enhance performance. They do not do the equipment inspection. The judges do the equipment inspection. Also, they don't make judging decisions. We do that. Now, what are the classes? There is the W1. That's a wheelchair archer who has functional limitations in 3 limbs and their trunk, that means their torso. They may shoot a compound or recurve bow. We'll get more into that later. The next one is a W2 or a wheelchair athlete with impairments in the lower extremities with little to no upper extremity loss. So you can see that the W1 has more functional limitations. And then you have the ST or standing archer. And this athlete either has upper or lower limbs or an amputation above the ankle or wrist. Sometimes they are allowed to use a stool, depending on the points that they get from the classification. The W2 and the ST athletes usually have an impairment in either the top or bottom half or one side of their body. And then you have the NE, or the non-eligible to shoot as a para-archer. It doesn't mean they have no disability. It just means they did not meet the minimal qualifying points to be classified as a W2 or whatever. And then you have the VI, the visually impaired. And World Archery classifiers do not classify these athletes. It is done by an ophthalmologist following the International Blind Sport Federation. Now, this is just information for you to know. Okay, the W1, the divisions we have in the W1, men, women. Then you have the doubles. This used to be the team with 3 archers. Now you just have the doubles with 2. They changed this so that there would be greater participation. It was quite difficult, especially for women, to complete 3. And then you have the open, which is combined W2 and standing. And again, men, women, doubles, and mixed teams. And then you have the visually impaired, and they have two classes there. The VI1, which is less visual impairment, and the VI2 and VI3 together. In para-archery, when they go for inspection, and the classifiers, when they classify an athlete, a para-athlete, they will issue a classification card. And this card is very important for us as judges. This is what a classification card looks like. It is, this one is 2021. I am thinking maybe they will change that assistive devices to adaptive equipment because they changed the terminology. And that is just to align with the IPC. Let me tell you about the parts of this classification card. The first part is the athlete's photo. So they will have an athlete's photo there. The second one, the classification class, that's what we mentioned a while ago, W1, W2, ST, NE, and the VI division. And then the status, I will go into that more later, but for now, C, R, FRD. C is confirmed, R is reviewed, FRD is fixed review date. And then you have a list of adaptive devices in number 4. And any comments from the classifier regarding the adaptive devices? And 4A, if there are unique devices, there should be a picture there. And comments. Okay, now let's look at the status. Confirmed just means it's unlikely to change. Confirmed means like there's an amputation, and of course a hand or a limb will never grow back. So that is a permanent disability, something like that. That cannot be, it's a missing limb or a spinal cord injury that has been severed, and it will never grow back. So that is a confirmed. Most likely it will not change. The R, it means that reviewed, yes. It is no longer considered an eligible disability. For example, like the length of the legs, it's no longer considered as a disability. Okay? Yes, because you can put those blocks. And those blocks don't even need to be in the classification card, because in the regular rules, you can have blocks as long as they're 2 centimeters, not beyond the shoes or the footwear. But let me just advise you, do not worry about these classifications. It's not your concern, because it will be in the classification card. You cannot argue that. Okay? You just need to read, and you know, oh, they're W1. So there are specific rules for W1. They are NE, okay, so we can let them shoot, but we don't count their scores. So those are only the important things. I'm just giving you an overview so you understand what is going on in para. Okay? And then you have the review status with fixed review date. It's for archers that have a condition that may possibly change. Perhaps these are young archers and they are still growing, or maybe the disability is, well, it could be worsening, or they could be getting better, especially the young people, because their bodies can better heal. Okay? And there is a fixed date. Most likely that's every 2 years they get reviewed to check. This is a screenshot of a classification list. In the World Archery Extranet, there is this master classification list of all para-athletes that have been classified. And as a judge, you can check this out. if you're having a competition, you can see from here that the adaptive devices, their confirms their status is there. The kinds of adaptive equipment that they can use, it's there. Their division, it's there, and etc. Okay, that is helpful. If like you're the chairman and you're going there before, so you can take a look at the list. Now let's go to the adaptive equipment. Now these can only be used, they are allowed adaptive equipment based on the level of impairment, and these are not authorized to enhance their performance. It's actually to level the playing field. Now take note of this. What's not on the card is as important as what is on it. Okay? Most adaptive equipment need to be in the classification card for the athlete to be able to use it. If it is not in the classification card, then they are not supposed to use that. And if they're using it, that is illegal. So if a device is not on the card, they may not use it. Except, there are exceptions, except for lower limb prosthesis or lower limb braces. These are for the amputees, yes, of the legs. And there are some other cases which we will go through. So like this one. Now here is the list of adaptive equipment. So we'll do the wheelchair first. And basically, it's a standard wheelchair with no more than 4 wheels. There might be a 5th wheel, but this must not touch the ground, and this must be removed when on the shooting line. Power wheelchairs are allowed, but they must follow the length of 1.25. Only 4 wheels as well, and they should be powered off on the shooting line and in a neutral upright position, because these can lean, I understand. Okay, so the left one, what do you think? Is the left one okay? 4 wheels. It's okay? How about this one? Not okay. Okay? That is illegal. Okay, the wheelchair shall not exceed 1.25 meters in length, including the feet of the athlete. Okay, so when you measure the whole, including the feet, 1.25 meters. Now, the highest part of a wheelchair that the athlete can lean on needs to be 110 millimeters below the athlete's armpit. So anything must be below that the body of the archer can touch. So here is an example of a judge measuring the backrest, making sure it's 110, not more than 110. Now the back, sometimes the back can be higher for W1 if noted on the classification card in the comments section. Now, what is the intent behind this rule? So the rationale behind that is if the backrest, let's say, of the chair were higher than 110, the shoulder blade or the scapula, that's the anatomical name, okay, but for us, shoulder blade is fine, will be resting on the backrest, and that would, yes, you're right, stabilize, and it will be like a support for the bow arm. And that would be a definite advantage for the archer. And that is the intent of the rule, why that is so. And you can see here Basically, this is the appendix 2. If you notice in the new rule book, chapter 21, it now says go to the appendix 2, and that is where the adaptive equipment is listed. So if you look at this chair, would you say that this is an aid? No, why? Yes, but since it is not directed, there's no way that the archer can rest his back on this, okay? Because it's way beyond. This is the backrest, and these are the handles. So this is okay, even if this is higher than 110. Yes, it doesn't touch the body. And if you look at this one as well, it's not very clear because it's bright, but you can see the push handles, it doesn't touch either the back of the archer. So it's okay. Now, the lateral support. For all wheelchair athletes, any lateral support is defined as anything that prevents the athlete falling sideways in the chair by providing support to the side of an athlete's trunk above the pelvis is allowed. As that first paragraph says, a lateral support can be a protrusion, it can be a molded back support, or the upright of the chair. I'll show some pictures later as examples. Now, the lateral support will no longer be listed. It's no longer listed in the classification card. The lateral support is allowed, but there is a limitation, and it has to be 110 millimeters below the athlete's armpit. And how do you measure this lateral support? There is also another limitation. Yeah, the width of the archer's trunk is measured from the base of the sternum here and the breastbone at the mid-back of the athlete. Okay, so it mustn't be more than half the protrusion coming out. Okay, so if you're like me, you're thin, too bad. Yeah. Okay, and what about this? Although you can see here that this goes beyond half the body width, it's okay because we only talk about that if it is above the waist. But since it is here at the pelvic area, then it's allowed, not an issue at all. I remember in the World Championships in Den Bosch, we had an archer with a, you know, this plastic box that you can put your fletch, your knock. He made it support here on the side, but because it was only up to the pelvis, so it was okay. Here is an example of a molded seat back. This portion. And here is an example of an upright. This coming up here. Okay. Again, don't make it such a big thing. Because if it's in the classification card, don't worry about it. What you worry about is the measurement. If it's the half of the body width and below the armpit. Those are the important things for you to know and to do. And this is an example of a protrusion. Would that be allowed?
No.
Definitely, because it goes beyond half. But look what he did. Oh, it's disappeared. And this is now okay.
Folded.
Yeah, you folded it. So it's foldable. I suppose when he's not shooting, for his support. Remember, you're always checking. You just don't check this during the equipment inspection. You are always checking when they are shooting. Because even this 110, they could, slouch back. And it's no longer 110. So you need to tell the coach and warn the coach to tell the archer. They do a lot of funny stuff.
They're smart.
They're very smart. And they will use your emotions
Yeah.
to kind of sway the decision towards them. So you need to be smart as well. Now, this is an armrest not acting as a lateral support. Why? Yes, because it is below the waist. But look at this one. That's his.
Above high.
It's very high. Maybe it's 110, but it's more than half. So that is illegal. Now we go to strapping. Strapping needs to be listed on the classification card if an athlete is allowed to use it. W1s are allowed any amount of strapping if it is on their classification card. So it can go crosswise, X, like a mummy, whatever. As long as it's in the classification card, any direction. However, the W2s can only use one. And it is wound horizontally around the trunk once. The width is 5 cm. That's about 2 inches. And it must be below the athlete's armpit. So here are examples. Now the W1 athletes can use strapping as I mentioned. If it's in the card, they may use any amount like these examples, and no support is given to the bow arm. For W2, it must also be on the classification card for them to be able to use it. And they may only have one single strap attached to the wheelchair and at no time sitting higher than 110. So look at these pictures. Is this okay? Looks high, right? Okay, so you have to measure that. So that is not allowed. Okay, the width may be okay, but the height is not okay. Now they may also be allowed to use leg strapping if it is on the classification card, and it's also 5 cm wide. They can put this around the ankles, the knees, or the thighs. And then let's go to anti-rollers. Last year, anti-rollers were allowed, but now they put a limitation in the new rules. And anti-rollers are devices that keep the wheelchair from moving when an archer stands up. And the one on the left, the one on my right, or your left, is a mechanical anti-rolling device. So it's built into the wheelchair. It's like a brake system. And the one here on the right are wedges, what they call wedges or chocks. And you basically put them in front of or behind the wheel. And so the limitation now is you can only use two of these, either in front or behind, or the front wheels or the back wheels. Okay? And only, yes, when the surface is uneven or sloping. If the surface is even, then they cannot use any kind of anti-rolling device. Then we have anti-tipping devices. Anti-tippers are allowed but should not touch the ground. They are really for safety. This keeps the chair from tipping backward, so that the archer or the athlete doesn't fall backwards in the chair. And I just want to add that in the rules it also says neither the feet of the athlete nor the foot plates may be in contact with the ground when shooting. Why? Because this adds stability to them. I had this case in Dubai, I think, for the FASA, and there was an archer that looked like the foot plates were touching the ground, but only because the grass was high. So I took an arrow and swept under the foot plate, and it just went through, so it wasn't touching. Okay, so you can do those kinds of tests if you need to. And then we come to the stool, and the stool is anything that normally is a stool, the definition, and however, there should be no backrest of any kind. So these stools are okay. This is okay. This is an example of this stool being used by this archer. And here are here's a stool that is not legal because it has a backrest. And here is a chair. Obviously, that's not a stool, and it has a backrest. Some years ago, we would allow an archer to have a backrest, and it was okay if they weren't leaning on it, if you could see that there was a space, but now there really has not allowed. It's illegal. Okay, and then we come to the release aid systems. It's a simple system that the archer can use as a legal release aid based on the functional deficit of the athlete. It's just a simple harness system. And there's an example. Unusual release aid systems should be pictured on the front of the athlete's classification card. Here are other examples of release aid systems. Now, the release aid system cannot function as a form of lateral support or as a rigid corset or a brace. It cannot be of hard material. Why? Because it will give added support to the trunk of the athlete. This archer is using a release aid, and it's okay because it's not rigid. It's also not below the rib cage. It is above the rib cage. So that one is allowed. But this one, what do you think? This is rigid as well. And it's way below the waist. Okay, so that is illegal. So as to mouth tabs, no release aids may be used with a recurve open class except for a mouth tab. And any para archer may use a mouth tab provided it's permanently attached to the string. And then you have the bow arm bandage. And this is for archers with a bow arm disability to secure the bow grip to their hand. And a bow bandage represents any form of non-rigid. So it must not be rigid, okay? Strapping which assists with bow gripping while still allowing for bow movement upon arrow release. So there must be a play between the hand and the bow. And then you have the bow arm aid or prosthesis that may be attached to the bow. So it's attached to the bow, and it cannot be totally rigid as well or permanently fixed. Again, there must be a play between the prosthetic hand and the bow. Next are the bow arm splints. And these are archers with disabilities to their elbows, their wrist, on the bow arm. Okay. Again, they must be in the classification card if they are to be used. So this is an example of a bow arm splint. This is also an example of a bow arm wrist splint. And then for the string arm wrist splint, para archers may use this, again, if it is in the classification card. And nothing in the rule says this cannot be rigid. So these splints can. Yeah. Now you have the block. Athletes with leg length differences may use a raised platform of any substance under the foot or as part of the shoe. Those two examples there. And this will give them more stability when standing. And this must follow the rule of no more than 2 cm larger than the shoe. And as I mentioned a while ago, blocks don't need to be in the classification card. Here's an example of an athlete using a wedge because of a tight heel cord. And this is allowed. The shooting assistant can be used by W1 or ST class para-athletes with severe upper limb disability who are unable to knock their arrows safely or efficiently adjust their bow sights. The archer can give directions to the assistant to adjust the sight, that's fine. But the assistant must always remain silent. They cannot talk to the archer. The archer may talk to them, giving them directions for sight adjustments, but the assistant cannot talk.
They are considered as one?
Yes, so they must have the same uniform and the same number. This assistant may stand. I know what you're thinking. That one is for the spotter in the VI. Yeah, so there is a difference. We will come to that later for the VI. The VIs are called spotters. They're not called assistants, but for the W1 and ST. Sorry, and this just lists what the shooting assistant's role is. Now, if the shooting assistant must assist during both the qualification round and during match play. Okay, it doesn't make sense if they don't assist all the time. That means the archer can actually load. Yeah, if I were the classifier, I would question now that, why the assistant is in the classification card. Now, during match play, the archer may have an assistant or a coach in the box, but not both. Okay, they have to choose one or the other, but not both. And then we have the athlete's agent. An agent acts as the athlete when it comes to scoring and is their advocate at the target. Now, it's their responsibility, the disabled athlete or the team, to see to it that an agent fulfills these duties. And it's very much encouraged, especially in large tournaments, and it's really very important that there is one agent for every athlete with a disability. Because sometimes there's only one agent and there are 4. It takes a long time because they'll go to every target to score and to take out the arrows. Yes, so teams have to take that into consideration, okay, especially in big competitions. Then we go to equipment inspection, but before we do that, maybe you have to slap yourself to wake up. Okay, so we come to equipment inspection. Now the rules are the same, except for a few exceptions. And that's why I like para, and I have nothing to do with 3D and field. Okay, so the rules are the same, the World Archery rules, except for the W1 class. The peak draw weight for W1 is 45 pounds. So no higher than 45 pounds. And these are for compound bows. By the way, they can use either compound or recurve. No peep sights or scope sights are allowed for W1. They can only use one, either a lip marker, a kisser, or a nose marker. Only one. A level device is also not allowed, but release aids are okay. Permitted, yeah. Both straps and body support or protrusions are allowed for W1. The back height of the wheelchair may be higher than 110 mm if that is noted in the classification card. If it's not, then they have to follow that, 110 mm. Okay? And an assistant will be listed on the classification card if that is allowed. Now the setup area, keep this in mind. You need more space for equipment inspection for the simple reason that you have wheelchairs coming through. The inspection area, you have to keep that in mind, no? Now, use a tape or target pins to form a line to measure the length of the wheelchairs. And before, we used to even have a box for the stool, which was 80 by 60 cm. You no longer need that because that thing did not make sense. Because if a wheelchair could be 1.25, then how come they can't have the same thing? Okay? So that's good. They changed that. And then during equipment inspection, check the classification card. If they don't have the classification card there, they have to go and get it. We can give them time to, they probably brought it somewhere in the hotel, or they have access to a digital soft copy. That's fine. It's okay. It doesn't have to be a hard copy as long as they can present a classification card. So it's just like a normal bow and arrow inspection, but there are just more things to look at. And there's a classification card to check. Okay? Check to make sure other equipment is on the classification card if they are using it. And you also check the compound bow draw weight. If it's the W or ST compound, what is the peak weight? 60, yeah.
60.
For W1, yeah, what's the peak weight? 45. Now the field of play. Wheelchair or other seated athletes may stay on the shooting line at all times. Yes. Okay, for all para-archery events, the ground shall be marked as set out in the World Archery rules, except, now each athlete shall be allocated a minimum of 125 meters. Lanes for individual events shall be a minimum of 2.5 meters or 3.75, depending on how many archers are in a lane. If there are 2 archers, because you can have 2 or 3 archers for one target. That is in the rule book as well. So if there are 2, then the minimum should be 2.5. If there are 3, minimum is 3.75. But for doubles or mixed team, the lane should be a minimum of 3.75. Now, electronics. This is from the December 2020 newsletter. So, I'll just read this. The Para and Judges Committee agreed that archers who are sitting in a wheelchair and remain on the shooting line all the time can be allowed to use devices like tablets or cell phones to read, access social media, etc. during the scoring breaks, but not while shooting is in progress for any archers in the competition. So this is allowed, okay, but it needs to be between scoring breaks, not during shooting. Okay, so we go to the qualification round. At a para event, athletes are allowed 1.25 cm space, 1.25 meter space. W1, shoot from 50 meters at a full 10 ring 80 cm target face. Compound open, shoot at 50 meters. Recurve open, shoot at 70 meters. And in the qualifications, archers may stay on the shooting line the whole time during the entire round. Now here are the things to look for as a judge. Check or correct for the correct back height. Check for the correct height on any strapping, and feet on the foot plates. They can't have their feet on the ground. It must be on the foot plates. And the foot plates and their feet must not be touching the ground. Okay, generally you'll know a seated athlete is finished when they place his or her bow horizontally on their knees, or they put it down on the ground on their side. So you know they're done. In the doubles round, I wasn't able, I had no time to get pictures because the last competition, I think, with these rules already was in Dubai. All archers remain on the shooting line as mentioned. They have to raise the arm when they are finished. Only then may the next archer remove the arrow from the quiver. And that's because they're all on the line. If arm raising is not possible, they have to arrange with the judge for another signal. And that other signal may be verbal, okay, or it may be some other physical signal. Because, yes, I understand. Sometimes it's difficult It's difficult to have the bow here on this side than to have it here. That is because in the first place they have an impairment. And if this needs to come this way over to the left, then they might hit the archer there, the archer behind, or wherever. So in terms of safety, this would be the safer option here, because this is their bow arm, or by the side of their chair. So it doesn't say what side, just the side. There are two sides of the chair.
I will show you. Okay.
Anyway, that judge guidebook is, yeah, it needs updating. Okay, so for the W1 doubles and mixed team rounds, again, the full 80 cm target face will be used with a 10 scoring zone used for all rounds. Doubles teams consist of 2 athletes of the same sex shooting the same class or the same bow type. Mixed team is made up of 1 woman and 1 man, same as the able-bodied. And then the timing rules for doubles apply the same as for mixed team. And this was clarified to you earlier. When it is para and it's mixed or doubles, how much time do they have? So there are 4 archers. If we're, let's say, shooting...
it's 30 seconds per hour.
Are we still not clear with that? Okay, we are talking about para archery, but this also is the same for able-bodied when we're talking about the mixed team and the team. Right? Okay. As I said the other day, individual is the key word when you add the plus 10. If it's an individual for para, you add 10 seconds. But for the mixed team and the doubles, it is the same. Okay? Now you figure that out. What is the timing now? Because you have already heard it several times. Okay? Now, what are the judge's duties? Normally, in the able-bodied, the judge stays on the shooting line. But because the para-archers are on the line, in their wheelchairs, we suggest that you stay on the 3-meter line so that the archers can see you, as well as the DOS. He can see you because if you're in the middle, in the mix of all of these, you might not be able to be seen, especially, again, sorry for the picture, because this is the old, well, there are 3 people. These guys are facing that way, and if you're standing here, they cannot see you. Okay? So it's best to stand at the 3-meter line. And also, yes, in front of them. It takes para archers longer to get set up, so be patient. You can't rush them. Okay? And yes, I mentioned that already. Position yourself near the 3-meter line where you are visible to the DOS and to all the archers. And make sure you know what their signal is if they can't raise their arm. And go back out to the 3-meter line while scoring is happening so the DOS does not start the next end until they are ready. Okay, eliminations, let's move there now. And elimination rounds are the same format as well as able-bodied eliminations. W1 athletes use cumulative scoring for 5 ends. Okay? That's the only important thing. That is the only difference there. And in the finals, the same rules as well as an able-bodied event, except for the following. Athletes stay on the line during individual, double, and mixed team rounds. During a para event, 30 seconds will be allowed for a para archer to shoot their 1 arrow during a match play with alternate shooting. This is individual. Okay, you see 1 archer, 1 archer. Now we go to the visually impaired. Who has ever judged in a VI event? You see, now there are much less hands. I think there are just 4, 3, 4. Okay? My experience is only one time, and that was the World Archery Championships in Den Bosch. Because as you know, in Asia, we don't do that. Or we don't have that yet. We've never had it in Asia. Now, visually impaired athletes usually have a significant visual impairment that is not correctable with lenses. And there are basically two divisions. The VI athletes have their own division. The VI2 and VI3 are combined and shoot together. The difference there is the severity of the visual impairment. The VI1 is less impaired, but they will need to wear blindfolds all the time. And that is because I think they can still see some light and shadow. But the VI2 and VI3 are completely blind. So men and women shoot against each other in their respective divisions. They're everybody together in their division. The VI1s, women, compound, recurve, together. VI2 and 3 all together. And if there are not enough people in the VI1 and the VI2 and 3, then together, but everybody now will wear a blindfold. And the blindfold can be a sleep mask, wrap-around glasses, or goggles. Judges will check these during equipment inspection and recheck as well during the competition, anytime they feel they need to recheck. The VI1 athlete shall wear the blindfold at all times on the field of play, and this includes setting up their equipment, practice, and competition. As long as they are in the field of play, they have to be wearing their blindfold. And for the equipment, all athletes must use a tactile sight, and no other sight is allowed. So the regular bow sights, that is not allowed. Only a tactile sight. And that's what it looks like, that tactile sight. It's the back of the hand touching a diameter of no bigger than 2 cm. The tactile sight may not exceed 2 cm in any direction and shall only be in contact with the back of the athlete's hand or forearm. When you say hand, it should be below the knuckles, after the knuckles. Now, this is a complete tactile sight. It's mounted on a stand, which normally includes foot locators. And the total width of the stand or foot locator shall be not more than 80 cm, or which is 31.5 inches. So here, okay, that part. And there shall be a space of not less than 90 cm between each tactile stand, measured from the nearest point of each stand. So from here to the next tactile site of the other archer should be at least, or at most, 90 cm. Not less than 90 cm. Now, the maximum depth of the functional part of the foot locators in contact with the athlete shall be not more than 6 cm. So it's this part here of the foot. And again, the size of the tactile site should not exceed 2 cm in any direction. And they may use either a recurve or a compound bow, and the peak draw weight is 45 pounds. And then they have the shooting spotter. And the role of the spotter, they must sit behind the athlete, not standing, but sit. Must, the English says must sit. Okay? And the spotter may only adjust the sight between practice and or scoring ends, but not during the shooting. They shall not disturb the other athletes during the shooting. They may talk, but it should be low voice, not disturbing others. Now, there are many other rounds, but these are the rounds that are used internationally in the World Championships, Para Championships. There are outdoor rounds, indoor rounds, but I am just going to mention what is being done right now, okay? The VI 30-meter round consists of 72 arrows shot in the full 80 cm face. The Olympic round is shot at 30 meters on the full 80 cm target face as well. So it's very similar, it's just the distance, okay? And target allocation shall be arranged so that athletes do not have to move from one target to another. Even if this means that their opponent, let's say, is in target 10 and they are in target 1. So you saw the setup there, it's very hard. It takes
Hours.
correct. I was going to say half a day to put that, but not quite. Almost like, it felt like half a day as I was watching them set up. So it's not practical to have them move. Okay, so they stay where they are, but the judge must be aware. Now, what are your considerations in the VI? You must know who is in the VI1 because they are wearing blindfolds all the time. And in the equipment inspection, it's the same as able-bodied with the exceptions of no sights on the bow, and compound peak draw weight is 45 pounds for W1. We may need to go to the athlete setup to assess if the tactile sight and frame are within specification. Because they don't bring this to you in the inspection. Most of the time, you go to the VI to do the inspection. And during eliminations, we may have to help the athlete and their assistant with the brackets since the athletes do not change targets. And that's it. Okay, thank you very much.